Hi folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report. In another report, I talked about fishing back in the thick stuff, flipping back in with heavy tackle, including heavy braided line. However, a lot of people now use braided line for all type of fishing. And one of the things I really haven't mentioned much is why would you choose, or what would make you choose a certain weight braided line? Now, by weight, what I mean is when you see them in the package, they'll say either 10 pound, 20 pound, 30, 40, 50, 60, all the way up to 60 pound braided line. In other words, it takes a steady pull of 60 pounds to break that. And in this case, if you were using 60 pound braided line, you could pull almost a tank around with that line. It is so powerful, it's unbelievable. So why would you want to use something that big and heavy? I think people do because they feel maybe it won't be as abrasive, susceptible as thinner line, but you don't need that heavy a line to catch any fish that swims in our country. I'm telling you, a 20-pound braided line, you could catch a 50-pound fish on 20-pound braided line. The fact that its pull is somewhat insulated in the water. It's not the same as if you were holding it up in dry air. But here's what's really important. I use the real light braided line because I want to use a light rod. I want to use light lures. And if I'm using a light, very thin braided line, it's going to cast better. It's not going to have as much resistance. But the flip side, the downside of that is that it really does become subject to abrasion and breaking. And you can lose a lot of lures. Even though you're not pulling on, say, 10 pounds of resistance, it can break much more freely. Here's the other thing that I think is important, is even though your options might be a 20 or a 30 pound, let's keep it at 30 pounds or under. A 30-pound braided line is still very thin. And so for most of you, and this includes my buddy Rust, who never uses the thin lines I do, and we're fishing right together for the same size fish and the same locations, and he does just as well. So if you think the fish are going to see that thicker line, maybe they are, but that doesn't keep most people I fished with from catching just as many fish as I do using the light line. I prefer the light line because I prefer using light, almost ultralight tackle. It's just more fun to me when I catch the fish. But that might not make a difference to you. And just know that the other thing is the thicker line, I think, is less likely when you're using lighter tackle to get all tangled up in the wind, and when you get slack in your line. That's a really important factor. And if you haven't used braid, well, you'll learn that once you start doing it, that it can be troublesome in tangling. And once it tangles, it can be a nightmare to get untangled. But my tip is don't go too light with the braided line because I don't think you need to. I think you can still cast 1/16, 1/8 ounce lures plenty good with 20-pound braided line. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report.